Hayao Miyazaki's ideological leanings are woven into the fabric of his films, but some stand out a lot more than others. For example, you don't need to examine Miyazaki's filmography very closely to know that this is a man who stands for environmentalism and feminism. He has repeatedly told us that harmony can only be achieved when humankind learns to respect the natural world, and his track record of creating strong female protagonists is well documented. However, something that often gets overlooked when we examine Miyazaki's work is that it usually promotes the values of manual labor and class equality, and this is a byproduct of his communist roots. Miyazaki got his start in the industry at Toei Animation, who hired him soon after he graduated from Tokyo's Gakushuin University in 1963. His degree was in political science and economics, though he was always more interested in art as a student and he loved to draw. Toei recognized his potential as an animator, but little did the higher-ups at the company know that this young man would end up being a major thorn in their side. Miyazaki was 22 years old when he started working on his first project alongside Osamu Tezuka, the comedy anime film Doggy March. Tezuka is widely regarded as the godfather of manga, having kicked off the post-war boom with the likes of Astro Boy, Princess Knight, and Kimba the White Lion. Working as an in-betweener on a Tezuka film was a dream start for Miyazaki, and he was initially in awe of the man, though the honeymoon period was pretty short-lived. He soon came to resent Tezuka for accepting low pay and terrible working conditions for animators when Astro Boy was adapted into an anime. The series would become iconic, forming the blueprint for the anime aesthetic that's now known all around the world, but it was hell behind the scenes. Yes, Tezuka laid the groundwork for manga and anime to become Japan's biggest pop culture export in the decades that followed, but he created a precedent when he didn't push back against the treatment of the animators who made Astro Boy, and that issue persists in the industry to this day. Tezuka simply wasn't the big brother figure that Miyazaki needed at this stage in his life and career, but that position would soon be filled by the man he would go on to found Studio Ghibli with, Isao Takahata. The pair crossed paths due to a mutual annoyance at the way animators were being treated at Toei. People were often expected to work through the night when they were on a project, and health issues were becoming common as a result. Before long, a union was formed, and Miyazaki became very interested in the idea of workers leveraging their power to stop the exploitation. In 1964, Miyazaki became the union's general secretary, and he quickly struck up a relationship with Takahata, who was vice president of the union at the time. Together with their fellow members, they read books and shared ideas about how to create a better working environment, not just for the employees of Toei, but in Japan at large. Takahata was a lifelong Marxist, and he influenced Miyazaki in a major way. It was during this period that Miyazaki really got into Marxism, one of the most notable communist schools of thought. He studied not only the writings of Marx, but also those of other political thinkers and leaders who were inspired by Marx, like the former chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao Zedong. Both Miyazaki and Takahata were also inspired by Sanpei Shirato's manga Kamui, a leftist tale set in feudal Japan that tells the story of a low-born ninja who is being pursued by his former clan. Kamui came out in 1964, and the following year, the first US combat troops arrived in Vietnam, which was another defining moment for Miyazaki's politics. It probably won't surprise you to hear that both Miyazaki and Takahata were very much on the side of the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. The direction that Toei was going in, mixed with the impact of Shirato's manga and the ideological battle raging in Vietnam, created the perfect storm for Miyazaki, who said, "Around that time, we were bad-mouthing Toei's work for not being with it and silly and such. It was just when Sanpei Shirato's Kamui was starting, and we were filled with an intense desire to create something new and different. The times really had an impact on us. The effect of the Vietnam War was really powerful. This desire to create something new and different led to the film The Great Adventure of Horus, Prince of the Sun, Takahata's directorial debut. Miyazaki was in charge of scene design on the film, and he was also a key animator. Set in Scandinavia during the Iron Age, it tells the tale of a boy who acquires a mythical sword and returns to his ancestral home to protect it from an evil ice wizard. The locals don't trust him to begin with, but they eventually band together to keep their village safe. The communist ideals of Takahata and Miyazaki are at the very heart of Horus, in which the villagers not only improve their own living conditions, but also society at large. By working hard and fostering a sense of community, they make the world a better place. The villagers are able to shake off oppressive forces, and they quite clearly derive pleasure from their communal efforts. As a film, Horus had a lot to say about the societal changes that were taking place in Japan at the time, and it would become the first of many statements that Takahata and Miyazaki would make in their work. Before long, Miyazaki had started work on the series Future Boy Conan, the first anime he directed. Future Boy Conan is set in a world in which an apocalyptic war between the United States and the Soviet Union wrecked the planet and left little arable land to grow crops. Conan is a young boy being raised by his grandfather on a small island with a freshwater well where a group of survivors are living a simple life. The story kicks into gear when Conan meets Lana, a girl who has fled from the nation of Industria, a caste-based remnant of the pre-war world. The core belief in Industria is that society can only be rebuilt by exploiting the labor of its underclass. Lana reveals to Conan that she was born on another island called High Harbor, where people also live in close contact with nature. Throughout the anime, Conan and Lana work together to protect these simple, peaceful communities from Industria, which will stop at nothing to secure any and all remaining natural resources. It's really not hard to see how Miyazaki's interest in Marxism influenced this series. Industria is a pretty damning commentary on the faults of industrial society at large. Its lower classes are forced to slave away, not for the betterment of their community, but for the ruling 1%, who use the riches of this labor to launch campaigns of colonization. Their goal is to find more resources and more workers, keeping themselves at the top of the societal pyramid they've created in the process. In a turn of events that's not really surprising when you consider Miyazaki's political leanings, the exploited working classes of Industria eventually rise up and seize control, with many of them opting to leave the place behind in favor of the islands that have chosen a different path in the post-war world. The core message of this story is clear for all to see. However, Miyazaki started to lose faith in Marxism when he was wrapping up his beloved manga Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Here is what he said about abandoning the ideology that defined his young adulthood. As I was trying to complete Nausicaa, I experienced a change in my thinking that some people might regard as a political sellout. It's because I clearly abandoned Marxism. You might say I had to abandon it, but it wasn't easy to decide that Marxism was a mistake, that Marxist materialism was all wrong, that I had to look at the world in a different way. I still occasionally think that it would have been easier for me to continue thinking as I had been. I didn't experience any dramatic, fierce internal struggle before changing my way of thinking. I was simply no longer able to deal with the various doubts that had been accumulating as I wrote. And I don't think I abandoned Marxism because of any change in my position within society. On the contrary, I feel that it came from having written Nausicaa. For example, I felt a little hesitation in the beginning simply because I had made Nausicaa the daughter of a king of a small nation, which therefore made her a princess. Anticipating that some people might criticize my heroine for belonging to an elite class, I armed myself with all sorts of theories to defend myself. But after a while, I no longer cared about that. Nausicaa could have been born anywhere. I have no intention of arguing about it at all. No matter what class people are born into, idiots are still idiots and good people are still good. It's not just about right or wrong in this world. People are either good or not. People we want to have as friends or not. I've resolved not to think of things in terms of class consciousness. The idea that someone's right just because he's a worker is a lie. The masses are capable of doing an infinite number of stupid things. So there you have it. In his own words, Miyazaki abandoned Marxism because he realized that people who are born into the so-called elite are not inherently bad, and that people power is flawed because some people are just dumb. However, there's more to it than just that. According to orthodox Marxist theory, a socialist revolution that brings down capitalism once and for all is inevitable. But this view was formed in a time before climate issues became so pressing. There is now a growing acceptance in Marxist circles that humans might actually destroy the planet before this revolution can take place. And this has started to blur the line between Marxist and ecological thinking. Japanese academic Kohei Saito, the author of 2023's Marx in the Anthropocene, argues that capitalism's infinite accumulation on a finite planet is the root cause of climate breakdown. And he's pointed out that Marx actually started to take an interest in ecological issues toward the end of his life. He wrote, "Marx came to see the plunder of the natural environment as the manifestation of the central contradiction of capitalism. In many ways, the same thing happened to Miyazaki as he grew up. He never lost his reverence for the working class, which continued to influence his work, but he started to care less about pushing communist ideals and more about humanity's impact on the planet. This took root in Nausicaa and became a common theme in his films after he co-founded Studio Ghibli, even in his most child-friendly film Ponyo, in which ocean pollution is central to the plot. He abandoned Marxism because he realized that selfishness crosses the class divide, and he saw humanity's collective indifference to climate change as proof of that." Here's what Miyazaki said when he sat down for an interview with The New Yorker when he was working on Ponyo. "I'm hoping I live another 30 years. I want to see the sea rise over Tokyo and the NTV Tower become an island. I'd like to see Manhattan underwater. I'd like to see when the human population plummets and there are no more high-rises because nobody's buying them. I'm excited about that." So, does this mean that Miyazaki is no longer a communist? Well, not exactly. He may have abandoned Marxism in name, but his words and actions in the years since suggest that he is still a communist at heart. Miyazaki is a man who is hard to put an exact label on, but I think the answer to this question can be found in his films if you look hard enough. For example, the villains in Porco Rosso are the capitalist pirates and the warmongering fascists, and even the title of the film is something of a giveaway, as Red Pig has been used as an insult against communists. Miyazaki often depicts himself as a pig in sketches, and Porco has that iconic line about how he'd rather be a pig than a fascist. Of course, the main message of Porco Rosso is an anti-war one, and there's nothing to suggest that Marco himself is a communist, but there are definitely some subtle hints in this film that Miyazaki still holds these views. The biggest one is the song that Gina performs in the bar, Le Temps des Cerises, meaning the time of cherries. This song is well known in France and has long been associated with the Paris Commune, a French revolutionary government backed by working class radicals that seized power in Paris on the 18th of March 1871 and controlled parts of the city until the 28th of May that same year. New verses were added to the song during this time and it became known as a revolutionary anthem, with the title serving as a metaphor for what life would be like in a communist society. The name of the song was even included in a video announcement when the French Communist Party adopted a new logo in 2018. So the inclusion of Le Temps des Cerises in Porco Rosso is clearly no coincidence. Given Miyazaki's history with Marxism, he would have been well aware of the communist connotations. The film also presents communes as the ideal way to live, with a group of capable women sharing their resources while working together and existing peacefully. Now, on the surface, this is just another example of Miyazaki's feminism. Speaking in 2013, Miyazaki acknowledged that his films often feature brave, self-sufficient girls that don't think twice about fighting for what they believe with all their heart. And he added, "They'll need a friend or a supporter, but never a savior. Any woman is just as capable of being a hero as any man." This is evident when you look at characters like Nausicaa and San, but it's notable that pretty much all of Miyazaki's female characters are presented as hard workers. For me, this is another subtle example of Miyazaki still being a communist. Feminism and communism went hand in hand in the early days of the movement, with men and women considered to be neutral subjects and females being encouraged to enter the workforce. Early communist parties supported women's suffrage and encouraged women's paid employment, pushing for females to work as labourers and eventually engineers. This was very much the case during the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, which led to Russia becoming the first major country where women had the right to vote and females were embedded into the workforce in a meaningful way. I don't think it's a coincidence that Miyazaki likes to create industrious female characters who often put the men to shame with their work ethic. This is not only the case in Porco Rosso, but also in Princess Mononoke, Kiki's Delivery Service, Howl's Moving Castle, and his most famous film, Spirited Away. Now, Spirited Away came out long after Miyazaki quit being a Marxist, but for me, it's clear that the world Chihiro gets trapped in was created by a man who still has communist ideals. The boss of the bathhouse rules from on high in her opulent quarters while the workers toil away on the lower levels of the building. They're the ones doing the hard graft, but it's Yubaba who reaps the rewards. Kamaji even introduces himself as the slave to the boiler that heats the baths. The place wouldn't run without him, yet he's underappreciated and overworked, symbolized by his 6 arms. Chihiro sees how difficult things are for the workers in the bathhouse, but she's told that the only way to survive and ultimately save her parents is to get a job there and become another cog in Yubaba's machine. Perhaps the biggest clue to Miyazaki's continued communism in Spirited Away is No Face, who is designed to warn viewers about the dangers of materialism and overconsumption. After being welcomed into the bathhouse by Chihiro, No Face embarks on a campaign to gain her affection and pay back her kindness. His understanding of the world is that being rich is what makes people happy, so he produces gold from thin air. The other employees immediately start treating him like a king as they attempt to scrounge as much gold as they possibly can, but this backfires when Chihiro rejects No Face's offer of gold and the spirit starts gobbling up her greedy colleagues. Chihiro is only interested in the well-being of her friends and family and clearly does not care about material wealth, and this makes No Face realize that meaningful relationships in life cannot be bought. His entire arc is a critique on capitalism, and it's no coincidence that he finds peace at Zeniba's place, where we see No Face using a spinning wheel to turn fibre into thread and knitting with the yarn he spun. He helps to create a magic hair tie for Chihiro that is made from the threads her friends wove together, as Zeniba puts it. Zeniba's idyllic cottage is a microcosm of the communist ideal, a place where the workers oversee the entire production process and have ownership over the product. For me, there are just too many hints here to say that Miyazaki gave up on communism altogether, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Am I looking into this too much, or does Miyazaki's filmography tell us that he'll always be a comrade at heart? I'd be interested to know if anyone has spotted anything like this in his more recent films, which to me are more about him coming to terms with his childhood than anything else, but maybe I've missed something. As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and if you enjoyed this video, think about subscribing because I've got a bunch of other interesting Ghibli and Miyazaki related videos coming up over the next few months. Cheers guys, I'll catch you in the comments. Cheerio.